No, she's in Costa Rica. Yeah, she went out of the country. Yeah, I think she left yesterday maybe? Yeah, nice, huh? Okay, you ready? Okay, we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. And Jane, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and that was the Eagle Ridge Middle School. Beautiful. Thank you. Beautiful. Okay. Jane, can you do roll call?
Madam President
Here.
Collins,
Here.
Vice President Montaño. Present. Board Secretary Coleman. Board Member Cotta.
Present.
Board Member Colby.
Here. Yeah, 4 present, and Wynn is out of the country today. She's excused. Welcome. We're going to go ahead and approve the agenda. And does anybody see any changes? Okay. I would like to amend it and move reports, item G, all the policies, 1, 2, under the business item, under A. So it'll effectively become B. Okay. Any other questions?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Okay. And I saw I had that motion for the amendment, so do I have a motion for the, no, approve
I'll
the
make a
agenda?
motion to approve the agenda.
Ramon?
with the amendment.
Second.
And I have Board Member Covey. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Okay. And do we have public comment?
We do not.
Okay. All right. We'll move to the accommodations 2019 Ben Lujan Maintenance Achievement Award, presented by Larry Tillotson. I don't know if I said that right, but okay. It said the presenter Larry, so are you?
Mr. Tillotson?
Yes, I'll introduce.
Okay, thank
Sorry,
you.
I couldn't hear. Good evening, Madam President Cullen, members of the board, and Dr. Cleveland. I'd like to introduce you to Larry Tillotson, the PSFA Maintenance and Operations Manager. I just wanted to give you a briefing. PSFA serves as the staff to the Public School Facility Outlay Council. They assist school districts in the planning, construction, and maintenance of our facilities. So if Larry can, there we go.
Thank you, Melanie, and good evening, Madam Board President, board members. My name is Larry. I am the Maintenance and Operations Support Manager for the New Mexico Public School Facilities Authority. Members of the public, good evening. Over the last 10, 15 years, we've invested billions of dollars into our public schools infrastructures through construction projects, systems upgrades to include HVAC systems, new roofs, and I know that in the last couple of years, many of our school districts have progressed to advancing their security systems in their public schools. Each and every one of these systems needs maintenance. Each and every one of these systems requires cleaning of some sort. In fact, this boardroom is a prime example. Beautiful boardroom, great lighting systems. I think I'm looking at the latest and greatest in technology on many fronts. So it's always a pleasure coming to the school board meetings here. You run things very well, and I'm very pleased to be here tonight. On October 21st, a couple weeks ago, we presented what are called the Ben Lujan Maintenance Achievement Awards. Once a year, we have the opportunity to recognize our maintenance and operations and custodial staff with the performance that they do for our public schools. They're really key in keeping things clean and well kept, everything well oiled and working as designed. They're key in helping maintain a safe infrastructure for our students and staff. The fire alarm systems have to be maintained on a routine basis. The HVAC systems have to be working. When you walk up to it, teachers want it to come on. When you walk up to the light switch, we all want those lights to work. So on behalf of the PSCOC, the Public School Facilities Authority, I want to present this award to the maintenance staff of the Rio Rancho Public School Districts, to the maintenance team. And I'll present this to Melanie so she can share it with the team. And I want to say congratulations to you all. It's always a pleasure monitoring you guys and seeing the work that you do for our students. So thank you for this.
Thank you.
There's also another award that we want to present that was, I thought, really top notch. It really extends and advances the Ben Lujan Awards to have the entire board sign off on this award so that the staff can see it as they walk into their office is just tremendous. So thank you for this.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
And I stand for any questions if y'all have any questions.
We appreciate that, and congratulations to your team.
Thank you, guys.
Did you guys have any questions? Thank you.
I just think it's always important, and one to thank you all for coming. The other is to always recognize the award, and the award is given in the name of Ben Lujan, our former Speaker of the House. And he was from Pewaukee, and we rarely have a stronger advocate for maintaining our school buildings, advocated for funding of that, and for this recognition. So it's an honor to have his name on this award, and we also thank you for being here and for presenting it to our staff. So thanks for coming.
Thank you. Okay, and we moved the reports down, so we'll go to the approved consent agenda. Was there any questions or anything that needed to be pulled?
No.
Nope.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I make a motion to approve as presented.
I have Board Member Covey, and then I have Board Member Para on the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Okay, next business. The board met in a closed executive session on October 30th, 2019 from 6:40 p.m. and I'm going to correct that to 7:17 p.m. for the discussion of bargaining strategy preliminary to collective bargaining negotiations between the district and the bargaining unit representing the district employees pursuant to NMSA 1978, Section 10-151H5 of the New Mexico Open Meetings Act, NMSA 1978, Sections 10-7E-17G of the Public Employees Bargaining Act, as permitted under the New Mexico Open Meetings Act. Here, I'm getting messed up here. I have to tell everybody just in the audience, I got new glasses, so I'm trying to adjust. So, as permitted under the New Mexico Open Meetings Act, the matters discussed in the separately held closed meeting were limited to those stated in the notice of the agenda of the meeting. All board members were present at the time. Okay. Next, policies. Policy 1010, bullying prevention, hazing, harassment, intimidation, bullying, menacing. First reading. Tana.
Madam President Colon, Vice President Montano, members of the board, Dr. Cleveland. Myself and Lauren are also here for questions related to policy 1010, bullying prevention. And this policy is really updating the already very thorough, detailed policy that we've had in place for quite some time. What we have updated in the policy, if you look through it, is regulations and law. And so we've basically just added what we need to add based on what is in the regulation and the law. There is one area to note, though, on the third page where it says 13, progressive discipline. It's important to note that first part there where it defines it, where it means disciplinary action other than suspension or expulsion from school that is designed to correct and address the basic causes of a student's specific misbehavior, which is referring to bullying. So that's important, that's a change. And so that will also be changing our discipline matrices, which will be changing as soon as the second reading, and you all are approving that at the next time we do the second reading on the 18th. So I stand for any questions. Again, everything that is in here and is changed is based on regulations and is based on law, and that is what we have added in here. And if you want to ask Lauren any questions, he and I worked on it as well together, so.
You have any questions? No? Dr. Cleveland?
I think it's just the importance of the definition of terms,
Yeah.
getting a strong clarity to what the terms actually mean. Sometimes people take those words to mean different things, so I think that's really good, very clear. And
Yeah, I looked over a lot of the definitions that are starting to put out into that policy. So if there's any questions later on, and you could always email Tana as well before the second reading. Okay.
Thank you for your
Right.
work on that.
But you know what? I did have there was the one question I did. Now that I was scrolling through, let me see. On page 10 of this, let's see. So there's the appeal process under page 6. So it's page 6 of 9. Sorry, it has 10 of the board book. Sorry. So the appeal, a student who is accused of prohibited conduct or who is the target of the prohibited conduct and is unsatisfied with the outcome of the initial investigation may appeal for review for the superintendent. And I know, so would they be going to any type of hearing where they would have to also be reviewed
No,
through this? So tell me a little bit about that process.
Okay, so this process is if for some reason they're accused of something and they're not satisfied with that outcome, they can't be out of school suspended if that part that's changed.
Okay.
And so this would be based on some type of discipline that they might have if it's in-school suspension or they felt like they needed to have a week of lunch detention and they didn't like the outcome of that, then they could appeal to the superintendent or designee.
Okay. So, and then that will be all put in the matrix, and then after this second reading.
So after the second reading, we'll take the matrix and anywhere where it does say OSS for any type of bullying, that'll be changed to ISS.
Okay. All right.
So it'll be amended and we'll have that posted and it'll show in red as amended.
Okay. Any other questions?
Question on the designee. Was that gonna change from time to time if you're not able to make that decision?
Well, if, normally, in these particular programs, Tana is the designee.
Gotcha.
She's Student Services Executive Director.
Your designee.
I am designee.
Good.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
And then she has someone under her that could be the designee of the designee.
Gotcha. It's all good.
All right.
Okay, thanks.
And then we'll move on to policy 1029, administration of medication at school.
Okay, so is it the medical cannabis one?
Yeah, so
Yes.
there's
Okay.
part A, they put it on the agenda as
Yes,
part A and
okay.
part B because of the
Right.
diabetes.
So it's the same policy, just so you understand, but we just put it both times so that you would know that one of them is for medical cannabis and the other one is for diabetes management. So, Lauren, I don't know if you want to speak because I wasn't sure if Evelyn was going to be here this evening. I wasn't able to make that board meeting workshop because of prior commitment. But my understanding is that you all came to a discussion there and an agreement as to what you'd like to see in the policy. So that is what is in the policy for medical cannabis in the school setting, which is under policy 1029, administration of medication at school. So I know Lauren probably can speak to it better because I was not here, but from my understanding, this is what was decided on. And so it's coming to you as a first reading again, and then we'll bring it back as a second reading on November 18th.
And was this gone through with our board attorneys as well, with Evelyn?
Yes, it was.
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Cleveland, the changes for medical cannabis were drafted by Evelyn after our meeting. There are also changes in this one related to diabetes management, and we did that in-house. It was just complying with what the requirements of the statute were. We have a very robust program already for diabetes management, so there was just basically language from the statute and the rule that need to be added to conform it.
But the medical
pub-
piece, the medical cannabis, Evelyn did go through it. And
Okay.
she took what you had talked about and what you discussed, and it's in here in this policy.
Okay, so we'll take it kind of like this step by step. So does anybody have any questions in reference to the medical cannabis part?
No, I read through it and it seemed to follow what we had discussed.
And Dr. Cleveland? do you have any-
No, I think, unless we didn't capture what you said, but I think we did. I think we captured all of the changes that the board had requested. And again, as said, Evelyn's gone through it, Lauren's gone through it, Tana's looked at it. We think we got everything. But I would encourage you to look through it carefully one more time, and we bring it back next board meeting.
Okay, yeah, because I do see the change under page 4, item 3, not to be stored. And then my other, so I know Evelyn had talked about that, but I still have concerns even being administered on campus, but I guess that's understanding that it is legally okay to even have it administered. Correct? Kind of with her.
Madam President, it's a policy decision by the board. The statute does require a policy on these issues. It seems fairly clear that there has to be some allowance there.
Can't hear, sorry. Have to keep turning it around when I turn around. Okay,
You are correct, though. It's still a problem with federal law.
it's still what?
It's still a problem with federal law.
Yeah, even having it on, even to be administered, but, okay.
I have a question, Madam President. So I know APS had also prohibited storage in their schools as well. Are they allowing the administration on campus, or are they still requiring that those would be taken off campus?
Madam President, Board Member Covey, my understanding is that they are allowing it. I don't know if they have a final version yet. I read in the media that that's what their policy includes, but I don't know if it's been passed yet.
Thank you.
If, Madam President, your concern is due to the fact that it still violates federal law?
Yes. And so my concern is even though we're not storing it and we're having the parent administer it, even though I think that there were some thoughts that it still can be administered on campus, my thing is that we're still bringing the drug on campus and still, if it's a violation of the federal law.
quick question, Madam President. Lauren, if we ultimately just say no to this policy, what's the PED going to say in reference to this? Because I'll be honest with you, majority of the school districts are waiting for us to make this decision. So statewide, I mean, from the smallest schools up north to down south, they're waiting for us. So what do you think the PED's going to do? Legally, what can they do?
Madam President, Mr. Vice President, I can't speak for PED. I'm not sure what they would do. From media reports that I've seen, it seems like the legislature is fairly dissatisfied with the way that it's been implemented.
Oh, yeah, they're going back.
I think PED would probably prefer that we do something within the realm of what is required under the statute, but I don't know what ultimately they would do.
Madam President, if I could recommend, the next reading is going to be when? On the 18th. That's not soon enough. I mean, that's really quick. I would really like to have something from the PED on their opinion on whether or not what they're looking at if school boards, we decide not to go with this policy.
Has this happened in the past, Dr. Cleveland?
I can't recall a civil disobedience directed by the Public Ed Department, but neither can I remember a time when the Public Ed Department directly ordered us to violate federal law. And so I think that that's the quandary that we're in, needs to be addressed at the federal level. I know, yes, there's I guess, a risk about it being brought on campus. I would have a hard time seeing the federal government step out and try to stop a parent from administering something to their own child. I don't think that they would probably do that, but I don't know. I mean, I'm not in a position to know that. I think it's very different when you begin then to require school personnel to do something. So yes, I would suspect it'll go back to the legislature this session, or at least, if not this one, the next one. It would depend on, I guess, the governor putting it on the call, and I don't know that she will do that. Well, I don't know whether she will do that or not. But if not, it would then be brought up in the following session, the 60-day session, for discussion. And then, in that time, we may see some moves at the federal level that might help clarify some of these areas that are just very inconsistent, very hard to know how to accomplish what the state wants and what the federal government has in its own laws and regulations.
I guess I know that the federal, most likely something happening with the parent bringing it on campus. There probably won't be any consequences federally, but I still have a problem that it is against federal law and that they're picking and choosing what federal law they want to abide by and wanting us to overstep. So I don't know. Ramon, what is your thoughts on this? I mean, I know we had this discussion at the last workshop, but I'm still having an issue with it actually coming on campus. I mean, because it is still illegal. And I feel, like I said, I really feel for the family. I really, really do. But we're still put in a position of disobeying a federal law.
Could I just add one thing? There are some districts who do allow the parents to come and pick their child up.
Right.
And
then
take them off campus, administer it, and bring them back. I know that there are some districts that are doing that rather than.
But that was prior to this policy, correct? Because I think Espanola
This
was
was
one of
not
them.
in this state.
Oh, okay.
It's not in this state.
Because I think there was an issue with Espanolas, and that there's another family that's part of that.
There's, Madam President, if I may, this is the first reading. We are going to have another one,
I know.
hopefully on the 18th. We can make sure that Evelyn's going to be there. I think we thought she would be here tonight. Maybe she can answer some of those questions. She's really an expert on these matters. And I think we can make sure that she was here to answer that. My understanding is that Estancia has adopted a policy at this point, and my understanding of their policy is they allow for storage. I don't know what they decided about as I stand here, I don't recall what they decided about who could administer it. But I believe Estancia already has one.
Madam President, the concern I have with anything that comes from the PED in some cases is, or the legislature is, they roll out something and realize we have mistakes. Nothing's perfect, I get it. And then they go introduce a 500-page bill to correct the 400-page bill that they introduced. So my concern overall is not really getting the insight from the PED itself besides what the law states. I would recommend, Madam President, if you and Dr. Cleveland could reach out to the PED via phone call to get a little bit more information to see what they're looking at taking back to the legislature regarding to this, because the legislators I talked to and the superintendents that I've talked to, and you've talked to plenty of them, they're just as confused as everybody else, not really understanding how they can violate federal law, but yet they don't want to hurt those children who benefit from it as well. So it pits one against the other, and it shouldn't be that way. So that's would be my recommendation, is have board president along with the superintendent make a call to the PED, get a little bit more insight from them regarding this, and then have our attorney here on the next reading for more clarification. That'd be my recommendation, Madam President.
And are you also wanting more clarification of what happens if we don't pass the policy?
That's more or less what I'm asking for from the PED side.
Figuring, so that's.
Yeah.
I do not believe that this was proposed by the Public Ed Department.
Right.
I don't think this was an initiative of theirs. So I think it came to the legislature, to them, rather than them initiating as part of their platform.
All right, so that was the first reading of that portion, so let's go ahead and move on to the diabetes portion.
So the diabetes management plan, if you look through it on page, it's at C, which I think it's different than my page is 7, but it's methods of administering prescription medication, and it's number 3, and it talks about diabetes management. At the beginning, there's some definitions that were added in. Again, all of this information that's being added is regulations and state law, and so it's verbatim for what that was passed, and so it's been put into here. I think the one thing that's important to note is that some of it is an unfunded mandate as to what we have to do for a district, and we don't receive funding for what it is saying that we have to do, but it's just important for you to know that. We have a very detailed, as Lauren said, policy 1029. We have for a long time. We have been very, very diligent with diabetes in our school system and at our schools and with our school nurses, and we have training all the time. So they're very familiar with what needs to be done. So these are things we're already doing, and now they've really put it in law and regulation, but it also talks about having to have more people for students in certain situations, which will cost the district more money.
Madam President, question. Is that the unfunded is that you're talking about in your perspective? Is the FTEs?
Well, it's having to hire for sub-nurses. Joe, are you here? Yes, Joe, why don't you come on up? Joe Sanchez worked with us on this, and she's the nurse coordinator, and it's having to hire for sub-nurses to help out on certain field trips, certain events, and you can just speak to it real quickly about how it is affecting us.
Right. So, Madam President Cullen, Vice President Montano, members of the board, and Dr. Cleveland, I do feel very strongly about this act in terms of how it will impact the district, not just nursing services. What the bill requires is that there be a trained diabetes personnel at every event, whether it's during school hours or outside of school hours. So we're talking about all the extracurricular activities, athletics activities. It could be, weekend-long trip to the band camp. It could be a field trip to New York City. I mean, we do numerous amazing activities as a district for our students. And to think that there would have to be a nurse or a trained diabetes personnel at every one of those activities. And the bill fails to differentiate between even type 1 diabetics and type 2 diabetics. There's no differentiation in the bill, although you would think, well, a type 2 diabetic does not need someone with that degree of training. It also fails to differentiate between students who require insulin by injection and those who can perfectly manage their own diabetes. So you can imagine if we have to have a nurse or a trained person at every one of these events, and we're paying out of the district funds, there was no allowance made for that by the bill whatsoever. So
So this is quite expensive.
Very.
it's huge. I mean, if just every one of the diabetics that we currently have in district went on one field trip, it would cost us over $12,000 to fund each one of those students to go on one field trip. And that's using a nurse in district that would only be getting her regular pay. If we're talking, you know, a week-long event, an out-of-town event overnight, even for athletics, I mean, we're talking lots of hours, not just the 7.5 hours that a regular event would require.
So when we implement this policy, then that means that we're going to have somebody trained on all these events?
Yes.
Yes.
The
Okay, and so
policy
do we have the
requires-
financial impact that it's going to be? I mean, I know what you're saying, but do we have an analysis of what it's going to be looking like?
We've turned that in as to what we think it will be.
You turned it into who?
We've turned it into Mike Baker,
Okay,
so to let him know what down the road, if we're looking at our ZBB budgets, and having the potential. I mean, it's hard to know because you don't know, so all we can do is speculate.
right.
And right now, we do have some funding, and we have that to use right now, but down the road, we'll probably have to request more funding.
And
Well,
so
we will have to, not, we probably will have to.
We will have to.
Yes.
we will have to,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, so Mike, do you have that, what that's possible?
I know, if I'm not mistaken, I think we budgeted $20,000 this year for that program.
Yes.
So the
But then next year it will be considerably more because then we're going to be starting all the field trips and everything else that they're going to be.
Well, this goes into effect, it's supposed to go into effect by January 1st. So that's why we're bringing it to you now, because we have to do a second reading, and it's supposed to be in effect January 1st, 2020. So we're talking this spring.
Because we have quite a few out-of-town trips.
So right now, what we have in our budget allocated for this year is $10,000 for substitute nurses to go on field trips. We also moved some money from the nursing supply assets account into an account to cover casual hire nurses if they're needed to go on a similar event. But that's all the money that was allocated. We didn't know this
We
bill
didn't know
was
this
coming
was
down
going
the
to
pike.
happen, so we weren't able to ask for the money to put into our budget.
So it wasn't on our radar during the legislative session?
No, during the legislative session, it was out there, but we didn't get the information
Until after it was passed?
until after and when we got it. And so what I'm saying is we didn't budget our ZBB
Right.
budget for this year for this expense. So we're being creative right now.
Working real hard to get some money in there.
Well, my concern, Madam President, is the financial, yes,
Yeah.
but being able to provide the FTEs to fill those voids. I mean, in the athletic world, are the trainers able to be trained to do that stuff instead of nurses?
They are not trained to manage diabetic students, so that is a training that will have to be provided to them. We have been working very hard to recruit sub-nurses. Right now, we have 8 that are pending in HR, so, we're working to get them in place. It's very expensive for them to put out the money for their own license, both background check and the PED license. Costs them $200. That's all they'll get paid in a whole day of work. So it's challenging to recruit staff to do that. But we've gotten a great response to it, actually, and have one that's been cleared. So we're making progress, but it's a challenge.
So can you explain sub-nurses to me and what the qualifications are for? become a sub-nurse?
They have to be an RN.
Okay.
So they could be an associate degree RN or BSN RN. Actually, all of the applicants that we've had have been BSN RN. So we've gotten incredible applicants. They then have to get a background check by the district and a background check by PED and get their PED license. So,
Okay.
2 years, right? Is that gonna be a longer license?
yeah, they'll get a longer license after, I think it's 3 years. Is that right, for the PED license? But yeah, it's a big commitment on their part for minimal hours. We can't guarantee them anything. I will tell you, we implemented a new field trip request form through our website. And just today alone, we have gotten 6 requests for a substitute nurse to go on a field trip with a diabetic student, specifically
And we
related
just
to.
implemented the online.
We just implemented it this week, so.
I mean, we are fortunate that I believe Joe has done an amazing job with our nurses, that we have many nurses that want to come to our district and want to work here because they feel very supported. So we're fortunate in that capacity, but it is difficult knowing how many will come and the budget for that.
Right.
I would think that we might have some that will do substitute that would just like to earn some additional money but don't want the long-term commitment of being a school nurse. And so that's the key, is to find those that are willing to come and, do these short-term things just because they would like to have a little additional money without having to commit for a full-time job.
The concern I have long-term, and not that we're not providing that service, I think those students deserve that. My concern is when we don't fill that void that one time and we don't meet the needs.
So that actually happened once this year, I hate to tell you, but we had a field trip scheduled at one of the schools. We had coverage for that field trip, and then the field trip was changed 1 week ahead of time to a different date, and we could not get a nurse to cover that field trip, and so the field trip was canceled. And that's the only option we have, because unfortunately we cannot provide an opportunity for some students that other students cannot participate in.
My concern is, say, an athletic event, sub nurse is supposed to be there, bus leaving at 3 and they're not there. We're not going to cancel that event through the NMAA. There's other sanctions and other things involved in that. And that's my concern, is another unfunded mandate that we have to deal with. And maybe our lobbyists can look into that as well for us.
I was going to say that when he comes up, that's something we'll have to talk about with the session, because, I mean, that's going to be a pretty big.
Smaller districts that don't have the capacity to have nurses.
Right, absolutely.
So, I mean, we're fortunate we live in a suburb and are in an area that we can be able to pull from different cities.
Absolutely, because there's going to be some small districts that are not going to be able to do this. And again, it's, it came down and they might not have the capability to implement it.
Well, I know through the NMAA, on the board of directors that I sit on, the NMAA is really coming down on the smaller schools who say they have a trainer, which they're really not a trainer. There's someone volunteering in that position. So, because some of the, like you said, don't have the staffing. So there's someone there who can tape and stuff, but they're not really a professional in that area. So this is concerning overall, but.
My understanding is that a trainer has to get a master's degree. So they go through a lot of preparation to get to the point of being able to serve in that capacity. It's an expensive job for them, and so we don't have a trainer on every single athletic event by any means. That would just be a huge expense. So that is a concern as well. I mean, even if we could get trainers trained to be the diabetes trained personnel, we would not have a trainer at every single athletic event. I think one of the things that we could hope that the law would consider is to make a differentiation between insulin by injection and those who can self-administer. That would cut down the numbers tremendously in terms of how many are required to have someone go on the field trip with them. So
Crazy.
So they want.
This has come out of, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
This has come out of children, though, that weren't able to go on field trips because of their diabetic condition. And so that's why the state moved in this direction, to assure that those children would not be refused an opportunity to go because they were, in fact, diabetic. And so there's a reason for it. But let me ask you this. If, for example, you had that bus leaving, they have to be on the bus, or do they have to be at the event? Because what I would suspect is happening in a lot of the smaller districts is they're probably saying, this week you've got the responsibility, and at the next event we will take it. But my question is, do they have to be on the bus with the, I assume they do. It can't just be at the event?
we have always asked these sub-nurses to ride on the bus with the students. What the law requires is that the bus driver or someone on the bus be trained to recognize hypo and hyperglycemia. It does not require that they be a trained diabetes personnel. So as long as that personnel is at the event, that might qualify. The law does require that there be someone trained to supervise a diabetic. In other words, someone that's knowledgeable of hypo and hyperglycemia and how to manage it in the short-term event while they're waiting for EMS to show up on every bus. And we're talking before buses to school, away from school, extracurricular. Yeah, so that's something that we can easily accomplish you know, with transportation, we have already had conversations regarding that, but, so we are going to have someone that can recognize hypo and hyperglycemia on every bus, just like we do have people that can recognize severe allergic reaction or asthma. So that's manageable. I can agree with that part of it. It's the trained diabetic person that is going to be very challenging. So do they have to be on the bus? It does not specifically say that that person must ride the bus with the student. It says they have to be at the activity.
Shall be available.
That's what it says.
So if you had a situation, and I don't know, Larry, if you want to comment on that, but if we had a situation where we did not have trained nurse, say the nurse calls in, so I'm sick, then we would be okay if we picked up the phone and, let's say we were playing El Dorado, and we picked up the phone and said, well, you have a nurse there that's trained to work, and they say yes, then we could go ahead and let the students go. But if the answer was, we don't have anybody there, then the event would have to be canceled.
Let me clarify something. The preference is that there's a school nurse that will do this.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually 2 other classifications of school employees. One is a diabetes care personnel, and that's somebody who, if you look at page 8,
Yeah.
A through F, they're able to do those types of things. This is like a stand-in for a nurse. And then there is a, what's it called? The diabetes supervisory personnel, which is somebody who can be like a bus driver, somebody who can identify when a student with diabetes is having problems. They're hypo or they're hyperglycemic. They can recognize the signs and be able to get care to them in a reasonable amount of time. With the requirement on, what does the attendance look like? It says that they have to be. This is back on page 8. I'm sorry. 3 after the A through F. There's another paragraph. It's the second line. So a nurse or a diabetes care personnel shall be at each school where a student with diabetes is attending, and shall be available to provide care. So have to be available to provide care. It's not really clear what that means. To each student with diabetes during regular school hours and during all school-sponsored activities, trips, and extended off-site excursions. It doesn't say they have to be on the bus, but they need to be available to provide care. That sounds pretty close to being on the bus to me, if not on the bus.
Well, and I think it might depend on where you're going. For example, if, I said we're going to El Dorado, and we're relatively close, and we're near hospitals, and we're near whatever. But if that same bus was leaving Cleveland and heading to Roswell, you have huge areas between where there is no medical help at all. And so if you had a student, particularly one that was type 1, would you even feel comfortable, and I would not feel comfortable having that child go without that supervision, given the fact that you have that huge distance to cover, where it would take a while for medical personnel to reach you. So I think there's some judgment in this in terms of where we're going, how isolated the area is, and what kind of help might be available to students.
So if I could just insert one more concern that I have regarding the bill, and that is that it is asking us to train non-nursing personnel to administer insulin by injection, which is completely contrary to the Board of Nursing regulations. So I have taken a very strong stand that I do not think we should be doing that. To train a non-nurse to administer insulin is very dangerous. I've witnessed it myself here in the district. Fortunately, no harm came to the student, but it can happen so quickly. In the hospital, an insulin drawn up in a syringe that will be administered to a student is always verified by another nurse. So for us to say we're not going to have any nurse present at all, I think is very dangerous. So most of our students have pumps or they have pens. So, we're not talking about all of the diabetics in the district, but there are some, and all 6 of those that asked for a field trip today alone require insulin by injection. So the nurses know that they need to have a nurse sub to go on that trip, and so they were on it. It's very impressive.
Yeah.
So it doesn't look like there's an option out. So that means that, like, if the student is comfortable doing the self-administration, they still have to have a nurse. Is that correct?
That is what the bill says.
Okay.
And I think that's part of it, that hopefully down the road we'll be a conversation about that, is
Right.
that if they can do it themselves, then it would only be those that actually have to have someone there to administer it.
Right.
And if they are able to self-administer, it would indicate that in their medical diabetes management, the orders that they get from their doctor. So it's not like we would be deciding, are they able or are they not? That would be part of their medical management plan.
Yeah, because it discusses it on page 9, the self-assessment and self-administration, but it doesn't say, but it doesn't really clarify if they would still sounds like they need to have somebody on the trips with them, whether
But
that or not.
it doesn't exclude the type 2 diabetic either, who doesn't need insulin period, right? That's-
Right, because it does talk about the oral medication, providing oral diabetes medication under page 8.3, but it doesn't separate that with the type 2. Okay. Very interesting. Oh, yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Question for Lauren. So if I understand it correctly, then they want to train non-medical personnel for administering insulin. What kind of liability does that open us up to? Because full disclosure, my father is a type 1 diabetic. He's been type 1 diabetic for 20 years. I've gone to classes along with my family. I sit on the Juvenile Diabetes Foundation board, and I know how to administer his insulin. And my grandfather was diabetic too. I can tell you that every diabetic, their standards for how much insulin they need are very, very different. There is no universal standard. So to me, hearing that, that's concerning, because I feel like that puts us in a very, very liable position. I mean, I'm no medical professional, but I have to go to a considerable amount of hours every year to make sure that I can help my father when he gets low or when he has these issues. So the liability is concerning to me, and I'm wondering if you can talk to that.
I think that's what she was mentioning earlier, is that you're adamantly opposed to having somebody that's not licensed because of that.
Well, I want to know from Lauren, because to me that seems like a really big liability.
Yeah, Madam President, Board Member, yeah, I think there's potentially a lot of risk there. So I think Mrs. Sanchez, she explained that in a hospital setting, when you're gonna administer insulin, you have 2 people check that to make sure you're doing it right. In my opinion, it doesn't seem like it's very wise to go that way. I think that's why it's our nursing folks would prefer to have nurses do it, if at all possible.
I think the other thing that you would probably be able to relate to is when we're administering insulin by injection, we are having to count that student's carb and then go to their medical management plan and determine how much insulin they need in conjunction with what their blood sugar level is. So we're doing all of that calculation ourselves. A pump can easily do that if the student has a pump, but without a pump, we're doing the count. I mean, that's a lot of responsibility, and to try to train someone to do that, especially in an extracurricular and event setting, it's crazy out there. And so it just becomes very difficult to think of delegating it.
Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next, the 2020 legislative priorities. And I'm sorry, this is going to be the problem with the mic, with moving it around. All right, so now that, before you even start your presentation, we're already adding to your list.
Really excited. I'm really excited.
I saw you writing notes, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got some good news for you, or bad news. Madam President and Dr. Cleveland, good evening. Would you like to start with the follow-up on the diabetes bill, or would like to take care of the priorities first, and then we go back there?
Okay, let's do the priorities first, and then we'll go back.
Outstanding. So, before you is I believe you have there in a file, the priorities. We have a total 9, going over the discussion that we had during the workshop. And that covers pretty much everything that we discussed, from textbooks, instructional materials, the ERB, reversing that legislation. We have cybersecurity there, Fine Arts Education Act, transportation, and all the items that we have discussed, including the, fuel cost and recruiting. Let's see here. Behavior and mental health services as well. And technical pathway. And I just need your approval on that. If you have any questions or want to make any other changes there or add something.
You're good. I do, Dr. Cleveland, what's your thoughts of this is kind of more of, for the funding for behavioral mental health, but as well as having different roles within mental health within the district. We were talking about, guidance counselors, therapists. I don't know. You said that they were kind of looking that way.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think that is a priority for us to start trying to get to work with the legislators to try to get that moving along? Because it's just it seems like we're not catching up whatsoever, and we really need to be working on that as well within those.
We have a
definitions.
presentation on the legislative dinner, just that purpose.
Okay, within the. Do you think we should add this? I think that maybe we should add this on there as well.
That's fine.
Yeah.
We do have a presentation, that, the positions that need to be added in order to accomplish this.
Okay.
And so I don't have any problem putting it in here as well. But we do have a presentation. We looked at it this morning of what we think would be necessary start for some of the needs that we have. But it involves more nurses, more counselors, more behavior specialists, and we need to fund that.
Yeah, just because to expand this a little bit more, if they're going to see this document as well, they probably will see it, at least to kind of expand instead of just being, adequate and ongoing funding, so they can understand what kind of funding is actually needed, instead of saying, okay, we're just going to put a lot towards behavioral mental health, but actually what we're looking at is needing those different specialists within schools. And some people don't realize that, the differences between, the guidance counselors versus the therapists, social workers, all that within there.
We have a proposal that was put together. Janice Chenault did a lot of the work on that, of what each elementary school, for example, should look like to provide those kinds of services, and what would be the additional personnel that would be needed to make that happen.
Okay.
So we can attach it, or, we can certainly present it to them when they come.
I think that's a great idea, Madam President. Chris, by chance, are you communicating with anyone from DOH, Governor's Office, in reference to the mental health component? I know that DOH, along with the Governor's Office and some of the other key partners that they're working with, are trying to unveil a program that they want to unveil. I'm not sure what that is yet. I was contacted once and haven't been contacted again. And so I wasn't sure if you knew of what is coming down the pike from the Governor's Office in reference to what they want to implement in schools when it comes to mental health. If you don't know, if you could try to figure what's coming down, because they've had several key meetings already that I've been told, and they had heard that I was working with the Attorney General on something else. They thought it was similar to that, and it's a little different. So I told them I wasn't, but they wanted to get New Mexico school boards involved, but they haven't reached out to us again. So I was hoping that maybe if you could help find some of that information out, because they're looking for people to be part of that, and that'd be great for you to be on that committee. That can help shape what schools are supposed to look like, instead of unveiling something and then here we go again, trying to come back and fix what they sent out the first time. So,
Madam President, it's my understanding that they are working with the PED on creating a task force for the upcoming year for the 60-day session. And as soon as I know when the formation starts, we can work with our delegation to have one of the members of the board appointed and be part of the task force.
thank you.
So frustrating is how long it takes to get these things done, because we had the 30-day session, so we have to wait a whole nother year past this session to really start seeing probably some changes then.
Correct, Madam President. And the reason is because, as you know,
Right.
it's a 30-day session, and there is a lot of, that goes through it. And the 6-day session, we can pretty much come up with the results of the task force and then endorse legislation.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we just are so behind, and we're having to wait another year. It's constant cycle on this. Okay. Is there any other questions or suggestions on this priorities? Okay, so we'll move on to the diabetes part for you. Did you want to, I know you mentioned about bringing this up to Chris Bolzano, so within so we were talking about adding that we need, especially within the finance, since this is all about money this session, it's going to be very important that they start funding these things.
So I can answer questions, or I can give you a background of what happened, and then you can ask questions based on that
I
information.
know you were typing up the bill, so what's the history, the background to the bill?
So first of all, it was under our radar, okay? We had that in our legislative priority list. It was there. Second, I was the only lobbyist standing against the piece of legislation, and again against the sponsor, which is the floor leader and the Senate. That bill was one of the 42 bills in the rocket docket, which means those bills were bills that were vetoed previously, and it would be in the rocket docket, and it's going to pass. If you look at the timeline of the bill, it took 3 legislative days to pass the bill. Generally, a bill goes through 4 committees, 2 in the Senate and 2 in the House. The bill went only through 1 committee in the Senate and 1 committee in the House. And you can watch me standing over there and explaining why this is a bad piece of legislation. But it wasn't a rocket docket, so it doesn't matter. It's going to go as a whole package to the governors. So on February 4th, the bill was signed into law. In addition to that, I just want to let you know that the only legislature in our delegation that voted against that specific piece of legislation was Senator Sapien. Okay, so just to let you know. Now, as we know, we don't know the circumstances behind. Again, this is a rocket docket, it's a package. You can't vote for one and vote against the other, but that's what it came about it, and we can stop that from going anywhere. Now, there are talks from the sponsor about the funding, and I'm in communication with her to work on that, and hopefully we can come up with something for the 30-day session, but definitely in the 6-day session, because it becomes a burden for not only our school district, but all the school districts as well. So with that, I'll leave with questions.
I just have a comment, Madam President. I think when these bills get proposed, realistically, a lot of districts look at what we're going to do as a district. And the media covers APS all the time. And what happens at APS seems to happen everywhere else is what people's perceptions are. But at the end of the day, I think what we need to do in the future on some of these bills, regardless who's sponsoring them, whether it's a Republican or Democrat, if they don't make sense and they're going to negatively impact our district, I think we have to publicly speak out against those bills and not just rely on our lobbyists to do it. I think, Madam President, through the President, Superintendent, I think those are some of those things we have to come out publicly with to oppose and explain to them why. Because a lot of times there's no conversation on some of these bills. You know that, Chris. It is what it is. And I'll use the election law with Ivy Soto, and then come back hours later and realize we made a mistake. And we have to, a major one. So I think we have to be more vocal on some of those topics, and we have to express ourselves how this is negatively going to impact not only our district, but districts across the state.
So they didn't do any type of fiscal impact report with that bill then, when it went through committees?
Madam President, I can provide you that.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll take a look at that then. All right, any other questions? Okay, Dr. Cleveland? Okay, all right, thank you, Chris. Next, furniture and fixtures for Shining Stars Preschool. Is- Oh, was it an action?
It is.
Okay.
We get paid the big bucks, right? You can't.
I was flipping through, yeah, because I was on the second page. I guess I apologize. That was a discussion action item, so I'm gonna have to bring him back up real quick. Sorry, I flipped over and didn't see that it was an action. So I guess we're gonna go ahead and vote. Thank you.
Second is motion, Madam President.
Okay. I have Board Member Para, and then I have Vice President on the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Sorry.
Madam President.
Okay, now you can come back. I apologize.
Get my exercise in. Board President Cullen, Vice President Montano, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Cleveland. The first item that I have to present this afternoon is ITB 2020-007-FAC. It is for furniture and fixtures for the new Shining Stars pre-K school. On October the 21st at 2 p.m., bids were due. We received bids from Beck TOI, Contract Associates, Goodman's, and Media Education. The district contracted through a third-party consultant, Decker Paris Sabatini, to assist in developing the specifications and to also assist with vetting the responsiveness of the furnitures that are being provided or being proposed by the different bidders. Purchasing went through the bid responses and verified compliance with the mandatory requirements that were identified in the bid solicitation, and Decker Paris Sabatini did a compliance with the mandatory requirements on the furnitures as far as specification compliance. And so our recommendation is for Beck TOI as the low bid for this procurement.
Do you have any questions?
No questions.
Okay, Dr. Cleveland, do you recommend approval?
I recommend approval. It's a really good price.
It is. I think we were probably in the budget area of about $450,000. So with the numbers that we got back, we were able to get the base bid plus the bid lots. So it looks like we got the whole package.
Great. Okay, do I have a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve Beck TOI.
I have Vice President, I have Board Member Parra on the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
The comment, Madam President, if I may.
Yes.
I just want to thank you for your professionalism. I know sitting on some of those committees and the amount of work that goes into these things is impressive. So I learned a lot through sitting in with those, having those conversations with you guys. So we appreciate you for the work you do.
Board President Cullen, Vice President Montano, thank you for the kind words.
Okay, we'll move to the school bus parts and maintenance, ATB number 2020-00 trans.
The purchasing department initiated a procurement on behalf of our transportation department. We took a listing of the entire inventory, the fleet inventory for the buses for transportation, and we decided to let's put a solicitation out there for parts, repairs, and maintenance. Right now we were piggybacking various contracts. We were under a challenge of ensuring that we were in compliance with all the statutes, so we said, well, let's put our own price agreements together, and so this is what you have before you. There's kind of a hodgepodge of different vendors. Some of them provide tires, some of them provide maintenance on the vehicles, some of them provide parts. Our recommendation is to award to all the vendors. Let me go back through some of the history on this. So on October the 22nd, bids were due. We received responses from Albuquerque Frontliner, Bill William Tire Service, CT Powers, Cummins Incorporated, Napa, Roberts Truck Center, Stewart Stevenson, and Worth. All of these vendors are providing currently either goods or services for the district, for the transportation department. So by awarding these vendors, it's kind of streamlining the process and making those resources available to the transportation department so they can continue with the maintenance.
Any questions?
I make a motion to approve.
Okay, well, Dr. Cleveland, did you have any questions? Sorry. I was looking at Ramon because he's looking over that way, so. Okay.
No, I don't have any questions, and I do recommend approval.
Yeah, and obviously, we definitely need to have multiple vendors on those items. Okay, so then I have the motion from Board Member Covey. Okay, and then the Vice President. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next, the department school reports to the board schedule. So we do have kind of that schedule that we were discussing before within our retreat. And then we also have, in reference to the policies, because we're now going to have to go back to start reviewing the policies again. Yay. And there are going to be a number that we're going to have to start looking at that need to be revised. So before you is the draft of the schedule. Is there any questions in reference to it? Yes.
So, for January 27, 2020, the way I'm interpreting that is we're going to do all the elementary schools with the WS, which I'm assuming is work session.
Yes. So we were talking about trying to divide up the elementary schools, and they have it as listed as yet the January 20th. So
I don't think we really decided. We can do all the elementaries, or we can, if you prefer, we can break them into two groups. But they did ask to present together this year, rather than to present separately. And I thought, it would be very good to try that and see how that works in comparison to what we did last year. But the request to do them as a group, they thought that it would be very helpful and would have a chance to do like C&I did last year, to discuss among themselves, kind of show how they work together, and then each one having an opportunity to talk about some things that are unique to them or special to them. So this was at their request, and I think it was a very good request. If we would like, there are 10, and so if you'd like to divide those into 2, 5, and 5, we could certainly do that as well.
So if they work together, it would just be a long presentation, and they all
Be quite
collaborate
long.
They all collaborate together to make one report
Right.
versus having multiple. And I
Right.
think that's a good idea, to just be a long evening, because we did have each one of them separately last time. Okay.
Yeah, I was just concerned for the duration, because we typically do reports at the beginning of meetings. So I was just, if we did have to change it to a business meeting or something, I was just worried for people that might be here. It would be a very long meeting, so I was just trying to take that into consideration.
But I think that they'll be able to condense it down and probably work a little bit better and get the data together.
But we can do 5 and 5 if you would prefer. You have the advantage of hearing them all together, though. And there's a real advantage in listening to how they all kind of interact with each other. So that was their preference, but it will be kind of long. I think you make a really good point. So if you don't want to go that long, my recommendation would be to take the elementary only and divide them over 2 nights.
Or just keep it just
Or
that
keep it one and-
just because it's the only one that would be on that schedule right now, right, Jane? For that night would be just the elementary and the middle and the high school. So we have no other reports or any other presentations on those evenings.
Because the last time, Madam President, the reports, a lot of similarities.
Right.
So I think it streamlined the time, I think. Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay. I said we can
That was
just
their
kind of,
thought as well.
Yeah.
and keep it like that, and, and we'll see how it goes, and if later on in the future we do too, but I think that we can keep it as one.
Making decisions.
Is there any other questions?
No, ma'am.
No.
Okay, so I went ahead and made this as an action item to go ahead and approve this, the schedule. Do I have a motion?
Schedule as presented.
Second.
Okay, I have Vice President and then Board Member Para. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Next is salary adjustments for transportation.
Madam President, Dr. Cleveland, members of the school board, last week we reviewed the Transportation Department Executive Director John Francis reviewed a number of the issues. I think one of the issues that stood out was the vacancies that we had on school bus drivers. We had a discussion about the salary and about the competitive nature of drivers in general in the Albuquerque metropolitan area. Because of our vacancies, we recommend that we have a salary adjustment to the bus drivers, and because they are part of the negotiated agreement, we did have a meeting with the school board, with the union on Thursday. We negotiated a salary adjustment. Starting salary for a bus driver would be $16 an hour. You do have a copy of the memorandum of agreement between the school and between the union to go ahead and make that increase. So this evening we are asking that the school board approve the salary adjustment for the bus drivers.
Is there any questions?
I just want to say, Mike, thanks for the hard work on this, because I know this wasn't easy, and then at the same time, I know the board, we've all said this repeatedly, and I know that Chris brought up tonight, but I really think as a board we need to come up with a way that we can better reach out to the public, because I know that I've been talking to parents about transportation, and a lot of them are upset with the system, but they don't know where to go. And I've had a lot of parents go, well, if you can't do it, who do I have to talk to? And I think as a board we need to make a collective, I guess, strategy on how we can approach the citizens and the taxpayers on how they can voice their concerns at Santa Fe, because ultimately it's Santa Fe that determines that, not us. And I mean, there are parents who want to help, so that's kind of my 2 cents on it.
Madam President, Mr. Baker, thank you for your work on this. I think it's going to hopefully keep our employees who are currently driving for us from going somewhere else. I think we're showing our investment in our bus drivers. I think it's one of those vital positions within the districts that people don't recognize. They're a very important part of what we do, getting our students to and from home and school and to events as well. And hopefully this will help recruit bus drivers to the district who are looking for that salary of $16 an hour. Does that also include benefits?
Yes, that does.
So, I mean, that's pretty impressive, and I think we're doing what we can on our end to fill that void. So $16 plus benefits is pretty good in this area anyway. I know other places might pay $1 more, but with no benefits. So I think this is a start to something, but definitely we still need to fight for that revenue out of Santa Fe to fill that void that we've been in for many years. We haven't been made whole, and I think being one of the 8 or 9 districts that haven't been made whole, we need to do it, especially now that the coffers are full and money's available. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and working on this, and I'd like to thank the union as well to signing off on this as well and getting it done pretty quickly. And again, that'll probably stop some of the moving from different areas, but really the need of just getting people to apply and become drivers. And hopefully this will somewhat help, but we need to do this long term and work with the legislative. So thank you. And
When does it take place?
Pardon me?
When does it go into effect?
It goes into effect? Will it go into effect within next pay period?
Most likely not the next pay period. It will be most likely the following pay period. So we need some time to process the number of individuals and everything that goes along with it. It takes some time.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think this is wonderful. I think it will help. I don't think it's going to solve all the problems. So thank you. I'd be realistic about that. It is part of a bigger issue, but this will certainly help, and that's a really good thing. And certainly your comment about benefits. These are good benefits, and we have a large number of our drivers who do take advantage of the benefits package that is offered. And so looking at that comprehensive, it's about a 30% more benefit when benefits are included. So it is, I hope that it will help. I am sure that it will help, but it's not going to solve every problem. The long-term problem is, it's a little more complicated in establishing a permanent bus staff, but it's great. It's a great start. So.
Okay. All right, any other questions, comments? Okay, do I have a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve.
I I have Board Member Farah. Okay, and I have Vice President. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you.
You, Mike, for doing that.
Thank you,
for
Mike.
us. Okay, advanced planning, Veterans Day, 11/11, and then the conference, they put all the conferences too here, so we're all set. Okay, and then the next regular board meeting is on 11/18. Okay, all right, we're adjourned.
Nice job. Got out here early tonight.
So I figured out, I thought it was my glasses. I really was trying to adjust them.
The upside down.
Yeah, well, I was sitting there going,